All right, I wanted to start with this quote as well. It's a famous one, but if you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. Um, I want to preface this by saying you don't have to have every detail perfectly planned. You know, a lot of it is learning as you go. But the more research and planning you do ahead of time, it will save you money, time, and potentially heartbreak as well, if you can do your research and get a plan together ahead of time. So that's why you're all here, and we'll get going. All right, so now we know that we need to make a plan. A part of a plan is having really clear goals. It helps us keep a realistic outlook when starting a new endeavor or making changes to your current operation if your goals have changed. And you know, a few people mentioned kind of why they farm, but a lot of goals that I hear from farmers that I work with on why they want to raise livestock might be for a love of farming, that connection, for profit. A lot of people do that as it's their full-time job. Some like to have it for homesteading. They want to have meat, eggs, milk, maybe wool for their home and family use, not necessarily just for profit. Some people just love the work. I have some farmers who are retired and they just love animals, and it's not necessarily out to make money for them, but it's an excellent hobby. And you know, animals are a great stress reliever as well. And often people like to have livestock as pets. And part of having that goal setting in mind is that whether you're doing individually with a partner or as a family, livestock take a lot of time and resources. And it sounds like many of you already know this. But I think if you're starting a new endeavor, it's really important to sit down with everyone who you think will be involved to make sure that you have the same goals. Is everybody on board? It can be a lot of work. I don't know too many farmers who are able to take a lot of vacation time. And so it really can be a 24/7 job. You have animals get out while you're at work or school or in the middle of the night. It can be really tough. So it's important to have those conversations up front if this is a new endeavor for you. All right, now to talk a little bit about animal requirements here. Can somebody tell me in the chat what are some kind of basic animal requirements that they think of? Oh, and I missed John in Silverton and Kathy in Lane County. So people are saying fencing, shelter. Yep, absolutely. What else are some really basic? Water? Perfect. Great answer. Water and food, that covers most of them. Vet care, animal health, absolutely. One that we aren't talking about today because it could be its own whole presentation, but I think like low stress handling is also really important and good long term. But yeah, excellent. All right, it's a great group. All right, so we are going to start with water. Water is hands down the most important nutrient. Without water, nothing is going to function. Their organs will shut down. They also don't, they have lower intakes if they're not meeting their water intake requirements. And factors that affect water intake include, of course, environmental temperature. We've all been out working on a really hot day, and we have an increased requirement for water. Livestock are no different. Feed moisture as well. If they're eating feed that has high amounts of moisture, that can affect how much water intake they have separately. Body size, activity level, level of milk production. Those are just some of the factors. And I have on there, animals should have access to clean water at all times. Of course, if you are, you know, transporting animals, if you are, you know, if you're working animals, giving them vaccines, trimming hooves, obviously they're not going to drink water in the chute or in the pen that you're working on, but just make sure that they aren't away from water for too long. So I have a few tables here that I have included to demonstrate water requirements for different species and for the same species with different classes as well. I have this example here for cattle. different species and breeds will have different requirements. And I mentioned breeds just because there can be huge variables in size as well. A Clydesdale and a pony aren't going to have the same water requirements, of course. And so, I have here some basic estimated gallons of water per day. So you can see horses are at 8 to 12 gallons roughly, cows 7 to 12, sheep 1 to 4, goats are the same, llamas and alpacas 2 to 5 and 1 to 4. And I bring up this this table down below, and it's going to be, the type is going to be small, hard to read, but just for an example, you have a lactating cow, and some examples with that temperature range that I had mentioned is that in 40 degrees, the average water intake is going to be about 11 gallons. It's colder, but compared to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 17 gallons, and I think that's 18 for 90 degrees. So it can be drastic. And that's compared to a 600-pound calf that's growing. Their water requirement average in 40 degrees Fahrenheit is 5 gallons. So it really depends on the animal, type of animal, and the environmental temperature outside. And I don't know if I mentioned this on the last one, but it's really important to check with your eyes the water each day. Unless you have animals out on rangeland, public lands, up in the mountains, you need to have eyes on water every single day. Things can happen if you have buckets, buckets can tip over, tanks can leak, things can happen. And so you need to check every day because, again, water is the most vital nutrient. And one example I have is a university that I had attended. One of their stories that we were always taught in nutrition class was on the school farm. They had horses out in a pasture that was maybe 10 minutes from the school, and somebody was tasked with driving out to the pasture each day and checking on the horses. And part of that should have been water. There was a natural creek that went through that pasture. And so what happened was it was hot, it was over the summer, and some students would drive to the pasture, look over, yep, horses are there, things are fine. And there's kind of a hill in this particular pasture, and drive back. And I'm not sure how long it took, but somebody went to go check, got out of the pickup, walked down to the water, and they had, I think, 9 horses dead. So that creek had dried up over the summer, and those animals were without water for a long period of time. So not to give you all the horror stories, but it's just really important to make sure that you're checking your animals every day, especially if they're at your place, and putting eyes on the water. When it comes to water systems, there are so many different types of watering systems. I'm not going to go into every single type. It really depends on what fits your operation best. And also, I'm all for, reusing and repurposing things. So you don't have to buy the brand new, fancy refillable heated water trough. There are all different things that can fit for you and make sure what's best. There's automatic waters, stock tanks of various sizes. If you have animals in stalls in a barn, you might have smaller buckets that you refill multiple times a day. Some places are set up for surface water. So it's really dependent on your operation. One thing to consider, especially if you have a larger amount of animals in larger pastures, bigger areas where the water trough might be far away from where they're grazing, if they have to travel far to water, is that if, as a rule, when farm animals, hold on, what was I going to say here? So if the water trough, I think it's around 1,000 feet or a quarter of a mile, but if the distance is far, the animals are going to travel as a group and drink together. They don't like to leave the herd, right, for safety reasons. And so if the water's far from grazing, animals drink as a herd. If it's close, they'll step away and visit individually as needed throughout the day. And why that is important is because that can help determine the tank size, and if you have it set up with a well, the refill rate of your tank. And so As a rule of thumb, if those animals are drinking individually, if it's close by, you can have a smaller tank that allows 2 to 4% of animals to drink at one time. And you'll need to have a flow rate that provides total daily needs in 4 hours or less. So if that tank is not refilling, those animals might not get that water when they need it. When livestock drink as a group, the tank should hold at least a quarter of the daily requirement for the herd, and allow 5 to 10% of the animals of your herd to drink all at one time, enough space, and enough water as well. So again, each situation, it depends on your operation. Monitor it at your place, make sure it's working properly, check it every day. A herd of thirsty animals can damage a water system or injure each other if they're not getting the water they need. They'll get agitated. Another tip is to keep your water temperature above 40 degrees. Now, I know it's not always possible for everyone to do that. And a lot of times, especially here in Western Oregon, we don't get, too far below freezing too often. We're fairly mild, but if you're in a place where it's consistently really cold and your water's freezing, it's going to significantly lower those that water intake for your animals. There's all kinds of solutions for this. There are tank de-icers. I have some pictures on the slide there. Make sure and read the box, because they might not be recommended for the tank that you have, like a rubber tank. It could melt or cause damage. So make sure you read everything on the product to make sure you're using it in accordance with the directions. But there are all kinds of other cheaper ways, especially if you don't have below freezing weather all the time. People will put floats in there. I've heard people will fill like a milk jug with maybe a little bit of water in there, so it weighs it down a little bit, but that keeps like a ripple effect on the surface, so the whole thing doesn't freeze over solid. And the animals can push it down and get the water they need. But again, when it gets below 40, your intake levels will start to decrease. All right, this picture on the right is a picture I see, or is something I see fairly often. Our horse water tank would get pretty nasty over the summer. Can happen. Summer especially, it's warm weather and sunshine can be a great breeding ground for bacteria in your water trough. So it is recommended that you clean your tank at least once a year, or if it's extra disgusting, every 6 months. Spring is a great time. It's right before that warmer season. And if you do want to clean it, there's some directions there. 1 part chlorine bleach for 32 parts of water. Let the water sit for 15 minutes or so. Drain and scrub the tank well. You can, wait till the water gets low to do it. You can shut off the water if you have your water tank piped to your well. But it's good to monitor that because all kinds of algae can grow, and not only does it affect the taste, some animals don't mind, but it can for those more picky individuals, and some types can be poisonous and toxic as well. So, and things get in your water trough from livestock slobber, urine, feces, debris blowing in. We've all seen those animals who like to step in the water trough. So a lot of times people will design it so animals can't get kind of up and over the tank. Viruses, parasites, and all kinds of bacteria can thrive in tanks. So keep an eye on it. And once a year is kind of a good rule of thumb. All right, now we're moving into feed requirements. And again, this is one where we did have a nutrition for beef cattle class, I think was our first webinar series. And so really it's its own class. So these are just going to be some general estimates just to give you an idea. And we can help you with resources for further information as well. So again, you have different classes, kinds of animals, and this in particular is with pounds of forage per day. And so I don't have pigs on here. Hogs typically aren't going to be efficient with only a forage system, so they aren't included on this table here from the Range and Pasture Handbook. But it just shows, this is again an average amount or an average weight estimate for these different species. So pounds of forage per day, you've got a cow with a calf is 26 pounds, mature bull 35 pounds, mature horse 32.5, and that's compared to our smaller livestock with mature sheep at 5.2 pounds, lamb 3.9, goat 3.9, and a kid at 2.6. And yeah, again, not only is it just size and species, but the class of animal as well. So, a cow with a calf is going to require more nutrition, higher plan of nutrition if they are, lactating animals. A bull during the breeding season is going to use a lot of energy and will have higher requirements as well. Performance horses are going to have higher requirements. And if you're raising animals for 4-H or FFA, and you want to get kind of show quality animal, they'll have higher nutrition requirements as well. And another reminder is in cold weather, it's winter now, energy requirements are increased, so those animals can maintain their body heat, and more energy can be provided through high quality forage, grain, supplement to their diet. Some things to consider. I highly recommend developing a year-round nutrition plan for the species, the class of animals that you have. There are all kinds of ration calculators. Your local extension contacts can help you with that as well. It's really going to be tailored to the animal and the goals that you have. If you make any sort of big changes in the diet, it's important to transition gradually, especially ruminants, which are, beef and sheep, and camelids as well. Or I guess they're pseudo-ruminants, but either way, you can really affect the rumen digestive system and get issues with bloat if you do not transition feed changes gradually. Another consideration is utilizing your own pasture and forage to reduce your costs. If you are using your pasture efficiently, you're following best practices for grazing, that's a lot of money you can save if you take care of them well. And we'll have a few slides later on that. And another tip that I really like to preach is make sure your animals have a good body condition score before going into the winter. So it is easier to maintain a good body condition score than it is to level up condition score. So if you get into winter, they have a lot higher requirements, and they were kind of on the edge of not having enough cover a good body condition score. They're going to decline, and it's going to take a lot more feed and dollars out of your pocket to get them to where they need to be. So if you maintain a good body condition score, you can do a little bit of preconditioning before the winter time, and you'll save money and your animals will perform better. So this is where the links will come in handy for you afterwards. We have nutrition requirements for beef cattle, dairy cattle, sheep and goats, hogs, and horses. And yeah, we did not have an extension publication for alpacas and llamas, unfortunately, but there are some good organizations I can connect you with. But where you're feeding is what you're feeding is extremely important. If formulated wrong, there can be dire and sometimes fatal consequences. And you may need to supplement pasture or with your pasture, because your pasture composition will change over time at different growing stages. The amounts of protein, sugar, carbs, and fiber will vary greatly. And so, you might be thinking, oh, my pasture is super lush and super green, but there might not be what they need out there. That's why it's really important to be aware, and also to test your forages. Forages have the greatest difference between the book value and the actual value. So it's extremely important. And we do have resources on testing hay. It's also important if you're purchasing hay to ask a lot of questions. If they have records from previous tests or current tests, it's good to have. But also, I think just if you're checking your animals every day, you're keeping good records and staying on top of your ration that you had formulated, you should be in good shape. And that ration basics there is you have protein, energy, fiber, and the minerals and vitamins. This is just a very, very basic form of that. But of course, protein is used in building up of muscle, skin, hair, hoof tissues. Energy, if your animal's doing any kind of work, exercising, just in general, we all have a base energy requirement. But that's where the carbohydrates and the sugars come in. Fiber really comes from mostly our plant materials, our forages. It's made up of cellulose and lignin, which are, I think of cellulose as, our plant walls, the fiber, and lignin is the glue that holds it together. And that's what, passes food through their digestive system. It builds up good protein in the gut as well, with ruminants especially, and minerals and vitamins we all need to survive. But especially if you have growing animals, lactating animals, extra needs, if you're pasture deficient, that's where those can come in. And again, if you're regularly checking your animals, their body condition scores, noticing any changes, sometimes their skin and coats can also tell you if there's an issue in the diet. But a lot of things can go undetected as well. So setting up a good nutrition program ahead of time can reduce those chances. All right, when it comes to supplement considerations, salt and minerals are very important. Animals should have access to salt. Many supplements that you'll buy will be salt limited. What salt limited means is that there is usually, it really depends, but usually there'll be like a 25% salt content in that supplement. And the reason they do that is because I think of it in like, in the picture, it looks like it could be a protein tub for that cow. And protein tub to a cow is pretty much like a Dairy Queen Blizzard to me, right? It's delicious. I want to eat it. It's the treat, right? The hay and the forage sometimes can be like the vegetables we don't want to eat, and the protein tub is the good stuff. And so with those mineral supplements, they'll put 25% salt in there. Not only is it meeting their salt requirement, but it's also so salty that they'll only be able, theoretically, to take a little bit. And so it helps regulate the amount of intake of those supplements. And so that's why, if you're wondering, that's a really high salt content. It's because theoretically, this cow should come up, get a few licks, get a few bites, get her daily intake target amount. That's what those are formulated to do, and not overeat the supplement. Like humans, like animals, there's still some that can tolerate higher salt levels and get more than they should no matter what, but in general, it averages out pretty well. Some things to triple check your feed bags. Copper is one example. Copper is toxic to sheep. So if you're multi-species grazing and you're buying a bag of feed, or buying a bag of supplement, or you have some grain, you're throwing it out there and it has copper in it, it can reach toxic levels and harm your sheep. So triple check your feed bags. Also familiar yourself with amino acids that are required for livestock species you have. This is also really important in nutrition. For example, lysine is the first limiting amino acid in pigs. And again, this could be a whole nother nutrition topic, but if pigs don't have lysine, all other functions kind of start to break down. Imagine it as you have a big wooden barrel and there's a hole. The most south hole is lysine. So if they don't have the lysine requirement they need, that barrel is never going to fill up. You're never going to reach your goals. They're not going to perform as they should, and they're going to have health problems. And so, familiarize yourself. We put some guides in the slides that you can do a little bit more research on your specific species nutrition. And again, not only is that animal not going to be performing well if they don't have the level of nutrition they need, but it can also affect their offspring. And so oftentimes calves or lambs or kids can have all sorts of problems before they're born. They can be deformed, they can be aborted. If you don't have the proper nutrition at really many stages of that cow's life, it's going to affect offspring as well. Some feed considerations if you're just starting out, where to buy. I highly recommend talking to other farmers, talking to your neighbors. A lot of times other people will know where they can get feed at a good price. If you're just going down to your local feed store, it might not be the most cost-effective way to do it. And that might be more for like bigger quantities. If you just have a few head, A few bags might make sense, but if you need a larger shipment, talk to your co-op's price check, talk to your neighbors. Also, farm classifieds, I'll get questions often about, oh, I'm looking for hay. Do you know where I can find hay? And yeah, a lot of times it's farm classified lists, farmer lists, like email lists. I know the South Valley has a farmer to farmer email list where farmers can ask each other questions. Sometimes I just see them driving around. I'll see, oh, okay, there's a sign for hay for sale over here. Sometimes if you're driving the rural area around where you live, you might find some local stuff that doesn't have to haul as far as well. But I mentioned it earlier, but make sure, especially if your goal is to make a profit or to at least break even, that you're keeping records and you're calculating those costs to make sure that you're within your budget. All right, some other feed considerations, especially when being efficient, is I see so much feed is wasted. And again, it depends on your operation. It depends on your resources and what you can do. But there are ways that you can reduce feed waste. And really, anytime you have feed against the ground, in the top right picture there, the feed is in a big round bale feeder, which is more helpful than not having it there. But it is directly against the ground. And in this environment, it seems like it's wet. You can see it looks a little bit wet to me. So there's going to be some spoiled hay down at the bottom. But again, it's what you have available to you that's going to work best. But for smaller livestock here, you've got hay off the ground. There's an even smaller version. I think there's even a kid in the bunk, which isn't helpful, but it keeps that feed off the ground and you're going to reduce a lot less waste. If you have a larger farm, some people will, especially more in Eastern Oregon, but what they'll do is they'll get those big round bales and they will roll them out on the ground. And, it might be more cost effective for them to not have to buy feeders or to be able to move that feed around, of course. But cattle fed hay directly on the ground can waste up to 45 to 50% of that feed. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're preparing for livestock and you're thinking of methods for feeding livestock is, how can you be cost effective, save that money and not waste as much feed? Because to me, 50% of that hay being lost, when it's spread out on the ground like that, cattle will be really picky. They'll pick out the best parts and then they'll just kind of tromp on the rest, use it for bedding. And that's how it gets wasted. All right, I won't go into pastures too much because we might have a pasture section later. It's really its own class. But I just want to talk a little bit about preparing pasture. Now, these are all pictures taken by myself or Melissa Ferry. But what is something you notice about, let's start with the picture on the left. Anybody wants to enter it into the chat. Something they notice and what might be something you need to do to prepare that pasture. Any issues you notice with the picture on the left, far left? All right, Robin says it's muddy. It is muddy. And the reason it is muddy is because this was a place where they had to get out and feed horses. And it was shaped weird. And so they had to take a lot of hay through there and with accessibility, that was their only way to do it. And so they didn't have a road. It wasn't graveled in. It's obviously a very wet spot. You can see standing water, some drainage issues as people have noticed. So this soil has been completely disturbed. They've driven an ATV through it. And what happens is that's bare soil. It's now compacted. They're going to have big issues with weeds. And then also, those are spots where your forage isn't going to grow in full, right? And so it's really lowered their pasture's productivity. All right, and then the second one to the left, next one, what is something you notice? Gophers, yep, definitely. There's a lot of gopher activity in that pasture. And the other thing I noticed is it is nibbled pretty darn close to the ground. Oh, and somebody did mention that. So we've got an overgrazed pasture and a lot of rodent holes. Again, that really lowers the productivity of your pasture. It's not going to rebound as well, and it's going to be out competing with weeds. All right, and then the third one, speaking of weeds, that one has a lot of weeds in that pasture, especially when I bet if you kind of walked over that pasture and looked down, there'd be a lot of bare soil. It doesn't seem like it's a thick grass stand at all, and there's quite a bit of problematic weeds in that pasture. And then, of course, on the right side, that is kind of a great pasture example. And can somebody tell me what the indicator is in that picture that somebody is managing that pasture well? All right, man, star students today. Rotational grazing. Yes, you can see some temporary fence in there. And also somebody mentioned even color on the grass. Yeah, it's a really nice grass stand. It's really green and it's lush. But yeah, so the reason I'm showing you these pictures is if you are planning to utilize pasture on your operation, you're gonna want to do some pasture prep to make sure that you're not overgrazing, that there's not poisonous plants out there, and that you don't have bare ground that's like hard compacted soils, so that you can have a nice productive pasture. And the other part of management there is that splitting it into multiple sections so you can rest pieces is really helpful. And the thing that I think all of us in Extension preach is do not put heavy equipment or heavy hooved animals on wet, vulnerable pastures like you see on the left. All right. So here are some resources. You'll get all of this. Again, it's a separate class, but we have information on soil testing to make sure your soil has the right nutrients so that it can grow productive forages. Nutrient management, so you can test and make sure or see what your soil might need based on the test results. How to manage for weeds, how to check for poisonous plants in your pasture, how to renovate it if it's needed. And just monitoring your pasture regularly will help as well. And please, please, please do not overgraze. All right. You might be asking, if you're new to this, you have some pasture, how many animals can I put on there? Answer is it really depends. Like a lot of these topics I've been going over, it really depends on your operation, what livestock you have, types of livestock, life stage. The pasture condition, plant species, the age of your stand, your soil type, moisture that's available to you. Is it irrigated, non-irrigated? That's why it's really important to manage your pasture well so it can be as productive as it can be. And then, yeah, your time, we have different climates and that affects our grazing season. And then the number of sections, if you can rotate your pasture and give pieces to rest, will really help as well. Now, I skimmed over that because we do have a free online pasture and grazing management course. It's fantastic. There are videos, activities. You can do it at your own pace, and it is free, which is amazing. So you will have access to that. I'm not going to go into this very much because this is actually the next livestock webinar series, but I just want to mention it. If you are preparing and thinking of having livestock, set up an overwinter area. An overwinter area keeps your animals off your vulnerable pastures when they're wet, so you don't end up with pastures like we saw in that picture. We have resources. It's going to be mentioned in our next webinar. So, or not next, 2 webinars from now. So stay tuned. Let's see. All right, next up, we're going to talk a little bit about cleanliness as an animal requirement. And I use this picture as a pig, although the pig doesn't care too much about cleanliness. You might know. But just talking about pen management and how it can affect livestock. And so a big piece of this is one of those things where if you plan ahead, it will save you a lot of time, effort, and animal health issues versus you're like, hey, I got them. It's great. I just put them in this pasture, this area. It's perfect. And then we get nonstop rain in Western Oregon for the rainy season, and you have all sorts of issues. So again, part of the planning process, some tips, why is it important? Mud makes foot and hoof diseases like foot rot, all kinds of stuff more likely. It causes animals to be perpetually chilled, which increases animal discomfort and increases their maintenance energy requirements. So you're going to be feeding them more. It can increase parasite survival as well. So you need to be managing these areas. And if you have large piles forming, if you're scraping your pens, you're getting large piles that aren't breaking up over time, you need to take them out. Or if you're even seeing in your pastures, if you get areas where animals are defecating a lot, you'll want to spread those out to reduce parasite loads as well. So maintain waste and make sure that animals are not knee deep in mud. All right, this will also be a part of the next one, but just wanted just so you can give an idea in terms of prepping for livestock. Animals are going to create manure. It's just how things go. And so having a plan and making sure you have a place to put the manure, a way to remove it from the pen. And if you have a compost pile, especially if you're in Western Oregon, it needs to be covered. If you're not covering it, it's running off, it's creating issues. And so make sure and cover it. Compost can be utilized into a fantastic product that could be applied to your garden, your pasture. Neighbors who garden will love you. Be careful if you have pig or poultry manure. That can be too hot. It can contain too much nitrogen to compost well. But those can be mixed to have a more favorable carbon to nitrogen ratio. Sheep, goat, horse, and cow manures usually are have a pretty favorable ratio. So again, we'll go into this in more detail in a different series, but I wanted to make sure that we talked about it. And don't be that neighbor that sets their giant compost pile next to a property line and doesn't manage it well, doesn't cover it, because neighbors will not be a big fan. All right, next up is shelter. Shelter is another basic requirement in a livestock management concern. Animals don't necessarily need or want to live in a perfect enclosed stall in a barn every single day. And it's obviously not practical for large herds of animals. However, animals that have no shelter from wind or wet conditions do require up to 30% more feed per day than animals that have access to shelter, especially from the wind. So, energy requirements for an animal with a healthy and dry winter coat, even this is just outside of the rain, they have a healthy, normal winter coat that's dry. Their energy requirements increase by 1% for every degree that the wind chill temperature falls below the LCT, the lowest critical temperature. So, energy requirements for animals with a wet coat increases by 2% for every degree drop in the wind chill temperature. So, keep an eye out on your temperature. If you live on a really windy place and it gets really cold, a windbreak, a three-sided shelter, they can be pretty simple to more complex. It's whatever you can do at your operation will really help lower that feed requirements and make your animals more comfortable. It's also important when you're designing a shelter area is to make sure that you have enough square foot per animal. So just in general here, shed space recommended per head. Cows would need 30 square feet per animal. Calves 15. Horses are 100 to 150. Sheep 8. A ewe with a lamb is 12. Goats 10. And then llamas and alpacas are around 20 to 30 square feet per head. And hogs, they obviously don't have as much of a nice winter coat. Hogs are really affected by temperature. And so their lowest critical temperature is much, much higher. So be aware. And there are several, we have some great tables on the lowest critical temperature and the highest critical temperature as well. If you're in an area, in the summertime, especially in Eastern Oregon, it's pretty common to have some weeks there in August where it's over 100 degrees. And I guess those of us who were in Western Oregon during the heat dome when it was 117, I think is what I experienced was the hottest. But having some shade and access to a breeze and in hot weather will help with their comfort as well. Dry, clean bedding should be provided if using a structure. So if you have something, some dry, clean bedding underneath, it's going to be helpful. It insulates animals from the cold ground, but you need to manage it as it gets soiled and dirty. Ammonia fumes can build up, and animals are a lot more susceptible to illness in that situation. Kind of one interesting thing is if for those with sheep or goats, or that, sheep, they have pretty thick fleeces, and if it's a little bit rainy, they won't mind, they'll be out there and grazing, but especially goats like to be dry, would rather be dry than eat. So good thing to keep in mind. And then just good ventilation. If you have anything that is going to be enclosed, sometimes it's hard. Sometimes the place you buy has a really old barn and just it does not have great ventilation. But just being aware of that, changing out the bedding, adding some fans if you can, if it's fully enclosed, will be helpful. And overcrowding will also make sure, if you're not overcrowding that space, that will help as well. Here are just some pictures of some different examples. I see a lot of this kind of like Quonset style hut. It can be pretty simple. You can build something out of stuff that you already have at your place. Again, sometimes just shade and protection from the rain can be really helpful. Or if you want to do a more intense, like 3-sided shelter, there's some examples there. All right, now we're gonna get into the animal health side of things. My biggest thing with animal health is to develop a client relationship with your veterinarian. Pretty much, if you can do it, if you already know you're getting livestock and you're going to have it this date, I would start shopping around, talking to people you trust that have livestock on who they have, see who's in your area, but you need to have a client relationship with your veterinarian as soon as you have livestock. Livestock vets can be hard to find, especially depending on your area. So it's important to do some research there. And a lot of medications have to be purchased from a vet. So that's why you don't want to wait for an emergency in case there's something that you need to give and you have to order it and get it from a veterinarian. If you have an issue, you don't have one, and you call up Cassie's veterinary clinic and you say, hey, we have an emergency, I need to get, LA 200, or you might have an issue where if you're not comfortable with euthanasia and you need your vet to come out, Cassie might say, hey, that's great. I haven't been to your place. I don't know your livestock. We do not have a patient relationship, so I cannot come out, and my schedule, having that relationship ahead of time, if Cassie's been out to your place, knows how you operate, and knows the common issues for your area or that your operation faces, it could be really easy for her to say, hey, yep, I can refill your prescription. We can get something set up for you. Swing by and pick it up from the clinic. So don't wait for an emergency. Do it ahead of time. Cannot say that enough. So also with that is setting up, once you have a veterinarian, is setting up an animal health protocol. Your veterinarian will help you based on the species, class of the animal, and the local area, the issues and diseases that is local to your area. They'll have all of that information and be able to set you up. And an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure has never been more true. In these situations, the cost to prevent and just stay on top of, reduce those health problems in your livestock is far more affordable than dealing with disease, serious infection, and cases that lead up to death. It's heartbreaking. Nobody wants to see their animal in pain. And knowing that with, a basic animal health protocol and a vaccination for that issue ahead of time would have prevented it completely. You just never want to be in that situation. So talk with your veterinarian and have a plan ahead of time. Parasites are an issue, especially with sheep and goats, and there can be an issue here in the valley. And especially sheep and goats often don't show any symptoms until it's too late or pretty well developed. So knowing about the parasites local to your area, treatments, and some ways of monitoring that There's things like the FOMACHA technique where you can keep an eye for the barber pole worm, which is the most common parasite that affects sheep and goats. Also using, not overusing and using different active ingredient products, can help as well with reducing the chance of parasite resistance. So again, nobody wants to see their animals suffer. And as a livestock producer, you are responsible for humanely caring for your animals and managing their animal health. So we have resources here for kind of some examples of animal health protocols, scheduling, time of year for different classes of livestock, but they're only guides. So please, please, please consult your veterinarian. All right, some supplies to have on hand, especially if you're new. These are just some examples, but thermometer, so you can monitor temperature, stethoscope, flashlight, vet wrap, bandage scissors, sterile gloves, something like tweezers, a suture kit if you are comfortable doing that. If you're not, again, having a relationship with your veterinarian or a farmer friend or neighbor who's comfortable doing that can be a big help. Halter or lead rope. If you're working your animals, you have an animal that needs assistance, you're going to have to restrain them somehow so you can treat them safely. Electrolytes, wound fly spray, especially in the summer when flies are really active. Iodine, rubbing alcohol, duct tape. I really think anybody should always have duct tape on hand. We used it for, all kinds of stuff. Fixing saddles, they can really do a lot in a pinch. Having clean rags, clippers, also human equipment, safety goggles. If you are, for example, maybe you're going to drain an abscess, I would probably want to have some safety goggles, or really just working with any kind of fluid or anything that might spray and get up into your eyes, nose, or mouth is important. One other thing I want to mention too is bloat supplies. I have had to treat quite a few cattle for bloat. Again, why you do not want to transition, or this is why you want to transition changes in the diet slowly. Having some basic bloat supplies. So, we would keep a hose, a piece of a hose, it can be, there are actual things that you can buy, but you don't want the hose to be so hard that as you, put it down into the rumen, you don't want it to be so hard that it causes damage, but you also don't want it to be so soft that you can't navigate it down. So, that was helpful. We would have unscented detergent, and that would kind of help to slick everything up and also break down. There's always some kind of like a plug that where the gas can't release, right? So that kind of helps lather and create a better route for that gas to escape. Some people like to have a trocar, which is a tool that, if you have an animal who is not going to make it, if that animal cannot breathe, it is so bloated it cannot breathe, you'll want to have a trocar, which is a thing that will puncture the rumen, but it has a hole so it can let out air, can escape. In a pinch, and I've actually heard some people prefer to just use like a very clean, sterilized pocket knife to puncture that rumen. Again, don't just go stabbing your animals if you sense a little bit of bloat, but if the animal is visibly suffocating, because that's what happens with bloat, is the animal suffocating. If the animal's not going to breathe, you don't have time to go back out into the house, call the vet, and see when they can come out. If you have to do it in a pinch, some people prefer a pocket knife and say that it heals better than a trocar. So things to keep in mind. Again, if you have issues, it's good to have a relationship with your veterinarian so you can call them up for assistance. Another thing that I didn't mention on here, but having, if you have breeding animals, if you're calving or lambing, having separate supplies for that as well. If you, like some people prefer to use chains, or they have like a calf puller, lamb puller, things like that. Those are other things you might want depending on your operation. All right, and then we are going to go into record keeping here. Why keep records, right? I know it's not the fun part of farming, I really actively hate record keeping, but I do it because it makes me better at my job, makes me more efficient, and it's really helpful to be able to look back and see changes or to compare, find details, find important information you need. It allows you to track all your farm expenses for better livestock pricing, knowing your cost of growing so you can sell your product at a price that helps cover those expenses. If you have a breeding program, it helps you develop better breeding plans for long-term herd health. You want to make sure you're keeping track of who bred who this year so you don't have any issues there. Makes any cost inefficiencies clear so you can go back through your records and make sure, kind of see where those inefficiencies are so you can work on them for the next year. Helps you track, control, and prevent the spread of disease. It also lets you notice changes in animal welfare, changes in animal condition. And I did see somebody wrote in the chat asking about body condition scoring. The next webinar, which is next month, is on buying and selecting livestock, and I'll go into more detail there with body condition scoring. But in general, body condition scoring is, on a scale of 1, the animal's emaciated, and then, it depends on the livestock. With cattle, 9 is like severely obese, and both have strong implications on animal health. And so you really want your animal to look healthy, like they're an easy keeper, and that not all of their ribs are showing, kind of things like that. But that we'll go over that in the next webinar. But yeah, keeping records, you can track those changes. It makes it possible to compare results year to year, so you can see what's working and what isn't. Keep records. Here are some examples. Obviously, if you're doing any kind of purchasing, sales, you want to have documentation that those animals are yours. Nutrition, keep track of what you're feeding at different times of the year. Body condition scoring, vet visits and all treatments, breeding history, pasture and grazing. I love when people, like the perfect client is somebody who goes through, takes notes and takes pictures of their pasture from different points of view throughout the year. So they can see from year to year, is my pasture getting better? Is it getting worse? Did that area of weeds that I applied herbicide to or hand pulled last year, did it get better or did it get worse? And then just in general expenses. Now, I don't expect everyone to have this perfect planner notebook that's color coordinated with tabs for everything. If it's a small handheld notebook that you take out with you, that is just fine. It's whatever you're going to use is going to be the best for you. As a tip, when I take notes or I'm keeping records, I really like to handwrite things. It sticks in my brain better. So I'll handwrite things, and then when I have time later on, I'll put it into an Excel sheet or put it into a Word document. It's also helpful in case of if you lose something, if there's a fire and your paper records are destroyed, you might be able to access that electronic version. So it's handy to have both. All right, for more information, again, I'm going to link everything to those specific species I've mentioned, all the resources I've mentioned so far in this webinar. You will have access to all of those links. But also just continue to do your research. Take as many classes as you can, read publications, watch videos, go to workshops, and talk to other farmers. Especially when reading stuff online, we all know that there's all kinds of stuff online and all different kinds of views. And so when I'm looking for resources, I try to use trusted resources. A lot of times I'll put in extension or EDU or university in the search bar so that I know that it is a research-based information. We have an OSU Extension catalog online. I will say the search function for that catalog is kind of hit or miss. There'll be something I search for and I know it's there and they'll say it isn't. So a lot of times the OSU Small Farms page has a livestock section and it breaks it down by each livestock type. And it has hand-picked resources that our team has selected by livestock. So I think it's really helpful. I might be biased. Okay. Again, with the research, there's a lot of other organizations as well. I love OSU Extension. I work closely with soil and water conservation districts. If you're not familiar with the one in your area, definitely get familiar. They often offer workshops, one-on-one technical assistance, and sometimes they have grants for farmers. I've heard of grants for shelters, for fencing, protecting riparian areas, all kinds of things. So get on their email lists, get to know them. They're really helpful. Same with NRCS. Here in Oregon, we have the Oregon Pasture Network, Friends of Family Farmers. They often have classes and resources as well. Local community colleges, depending on where you are, often have opportunities for learning, livestock associations, feed stores. And there's a lot more. So they are out there. If you have any that you want to share with the group, you can go ahead and put them in the chat. But yeah, I think getting well-rounded information from reputable groups like this is just a great way to keep learning.